Oh, we got some new people. Okay, well, welcome everyone. This is Friday, the 19th of January. I cannot believe it's almost the end of January already. That seems crazy to me. Today we're going to discuss planning 2024. Some people have already started planning at the end of last year, but I usually see people asking until maybe the beginning of March to discuss different topics in planning. A couple of weeks ago, or maybe early last week, we had a call with several people, and Taylor Bogar from Apollo, and we were talking about net recurring revenue being a focus for this year. I did a short poll a couple of weeks ago that just kind of asked people in the newsletter who what like their topics are for this year, what are their priorities. And it's not super different from last year. The top one was retention, then revenue, then adoption, and references. Maybe switch those last two. Adoption and retention, though, seem to be becoming more important. I think it has to do with possibly the cuts across customer success. Apparently, even though marketers were hit hard in the last couple of years, customer success was hit even harder. And yeah, so those are the bigger topics that I'm seeing this year. I'm gonna put that up at the top here: retention, revenue, references, and adoption. Which isn't references kind of tied to revenue as well. So I thought I'd just start by asking, what are you all kind of working on this year? What are some of your top goals and topics that you really need to drive in your organization? If anybody has any trouble with the screen, down in the bottom right, you can see how zoomed in or zoomed out you are. And if you want to add anything, go ahead. If you can. If you can't and you want to, just let me know. The same as we always are. This is a very conversational call. Just jump in and share what you want to share.
If you want, Mary, let me share some thoughts. And so I'm not in a role at the moment, but I am obviously job hunting for a role. But what I'm noticing, certainly from the interviews I've been doing and the job adverts that I'm seeing, is it's a heavy focus on revenue and growth. Much more, in a sense, the retention bit is, I would argue, a given, but effectively what organizations appear to be focused on is we just want you to be able to drive repeat and kind of regular revenue from existing customers, and then maybe even support net new sort of opportunities. And that's where, from what I'm sitting, but in this side of the pond anyway, that's primarily the real kind of emphasis. There's very little, and there's also, reading between the lines, a tendency to kind of assume that can be done quickly, as opposed to, hey, these things take time and you've got to build the relationships and deepen those relationships and all that kind of stuff. So that's, for me, quite interesting, and it's, I suppose, expected in one way given the current economic headwinds. But I would have thought, that perhaps organisations might be more willing to invest in the broader customer success marketing and advocacy, recognizing that these things do take time.
Yeah, I see both Lauren and Christina are talking about retention and expansion. Yeah, the expansion kind of falls under that retention and revenue, both of them together. I don't think I put that separately on the poll I sent out. But I'm seeing like customer marketing, advocacy, professionals is kind of becoming this post-sales Swiss Army knife. I said that a couple calls ago. And like we have to kind of figure out all the ways to support different functions, by driving reviews and revenues and or reviews and references and all of those things. But I had an interesting call with Alyssa Steiner at the end of last year, early December, I think it was, and she made a really great case for how important it is for us to show our support to sales. Not that we don't already support sales, but that we don't necessarily make them super aware of it in the way of, hey, you need us, we need you to champion for us type of thing. And that came across as a little bit different to me because I know we've gotten a lot of people talking about how we need to drive revenue. And going through sales is one of those ways to do it. Obviously, customer marketing, email, and all of those campaigns do as well. But we often lack being able to prove the value of our programs, which I know like Dean Shaw is going to be talking about that with me and Diana from Advocacy even next Wednesday. And I thought it was a really important point that she made on how much we need to both show that we are supportive of sales and make sure that they know it, because when they know it, then it feels like we have even more of that support from them to be like, hey, we need these people, you can't get rid of them. I don't know what other people think about that. I guess it's going off topic a little bit, but
Hey, Mary, I can share a few thoughts.
sure.
Can you hear me? It's Rebecca. So one of the things I think is super interesting is my background was actually more in customer lifecycle marketing, one-to-many, PLG. I didn't know customer advocacy existed until a few years later, a few years ago, many years into my career. And really what I've seen in the last year or two, and some of us and people who have seen or heard from you before know that I talk a lot about customer marketing, meaning lifecycle marketing as well as advocacy. And I'm really seeing this huge switch or emphasis on both the life cycle side as well, which I think has been super interesting. So one of the things that I'm very focused on also is expansion. How do we drive more revenue from our existing customers? And what I realized last year, I had somebody on my team that transitioned from my team to product marketing, and it was an uphill battle to try to like really figure out how to do expansion well. And part of what I figured out is we were taking on too much. So I don't know if other people are having this challenge, but the way that we have it now set up. So if you don't have it set up this way, and there's any way that you can, I encourage you to think about it. And we're still working through it, so we don't have it perfect, but I'm happy to chat more. So actually like the chief customer officer, we have these things called VCP, value creation process. I don't know if that's a common term, but it's like this big thing with an executive sponsor. And so now that there's an executive sponsor who's in charge of growing revenue, and there's a program manager who's in charge of supporting them and bringing people together across the company, we now have a lane. So we don't own all of the aspects of retention, of expansion and growing revenue. We own a lane of it. And so we own, so product marketing decides like, what is the audience and who are we targeting and what is our best opportunity to go after? Our expertise is, and like the messaging and the positioning, our expertise is how and when we communicate with people. And so by having somebody like program manage the whole thing and us being really clear about what our lane is, it has made things so much easier, because now like the person on my team was spending hours and hours trying to figure out if somebody raises their hand, like how do we get them over to sales and like all of the back end stuff. And I've started saying no, like our team cannot own everything. We need to figure out who across the organization owns which part. So I don't know if other people here feel like you're owning the whole thing and it's overwhelming, or if other people are set up with sort of program managers and other people as well. But I just thought I'd share where we are right now.
So I just respond to that, Rebecca, and something else that you picked on, Mary. So my background is command gen and field marketing. And so I've sort of kind of doing customer advocacy in the last company as part of that. And one of the things that I think maybe we're missing a trick here, but something I used to push really hard. I would join the weekly sales leadership meetings and more importantly, the pipe generation meetings, because that was kind of my bread and butter and day job in terms of trying to work out where we're driving pipe, what we need to do. But as part of those conversations, I would focus the sales guys and down on the fact that beyond the net new, we are looking at upsell, cross-sell, renewal, and where are they in that process, and more importantly, what references and customers perhaps do they need that can help engage and support that? Because my experience in the former company was that there was a separate customer advocacy team, but they never joined any of the sales calls. If anything, we would, if we needed references or the sales teams needed references, there'd be a kind of round robin where, the request would go up, they'd then come back to sales and me and others. So I say, hey, do you know so-and-so? Do you kind of think you're missing the trick here? Get involved with sales, literally be part of that conversation and part of that process. And therefore you can show the value. And I think this is the point you're perhaps alluding to, Mary, to show the value of customer advocacy and kind of success marketing, because it's literally in their face. The sales teams can see it's more than just a reference, it's how it impacts revenue. And I don't know whether everybody else perhaps, is seeing something similar, or whether they're doing similar things in their organizations.
Well, I think like going back to what Rebecca was saying, like a lot of people in our space are overwhelmed and trying to do too many things. And that's a really good point, to be able to try to get that focus. I'll get to you in just a second, Daniel. Yeah, to get that focus, I just want to say from my background as well in community and marketing, I learned that you had to do the same thing. It has to be like figure out the things that you're best at, that you can actually really focus on, and make those a priority and work on those, and kind of like bring your organization along with that. But obviously there's an art to it, and it's a little bit different for everyone in their organization. Some people just don't feel like they can. Go ahead, Daniel.
Awesome. Well, happy Friday, everybody. Sorry, I've been missing the last couple ones, but I wanted to make sure I was here. A couple points on that. One, when I started, which actually happened to be 3 years ago today, one of the first things I did was kind of a combination of the two things we're talking about. One, make sure that we put guardrails on exactly what we were doing. And how we did that was we actually went around to every single sales meeting that there was, whether it was with the executives, whether it was with the individual people, and put together, like, these are the things we do. And we do them very well. And we will be here to help you sort of be connective tissue, but this is what we do. And so that started from the very beginning, setting expectations that these are the areas that we can deliver on. If you give more to us, we're happy to consider it, but you have to remember what we have to offset if because we only have the same amount of time. And if we tell you that we're doing something and you want us to do something else, you have to know that we can't do all the things that we told you we were going to do. The second thing there is on the getting in front of sales as early as possible. We actually independently worked with our enablement team. So we're one of the teams that presents to every new hire class and shows them the value of our team and working with us within the first few weeks that they start. So getting to indoctrinate people, as it were, at the beginning, that our team is there to support them and make their lives easier. But at the same time, as part of that presentation, we show them how they can also help us, and how it is a self-fulfilling cycle the entire time. So it's really sort of that two-pronged approach.
Yeah, I agree. Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, question actually back to Rebecca. I'm curious to hear a little bit more on the steps you took to delineate, right, to create the lanes that your team worked in, and then background on your organization. Was there already like a RevOps function that helped to sort of step in and start to do those sort of like targeting mechanisms, or was that more done do like with a collaboration with the AM team?
Yeah, so we're still figuring all of this out. Like, we don't have all of the answers. I think because we have a program manager on the customer in the customer org, and she brought people together because her executive wants us to figure this out. So also for us, we have a so our renewals team and our expansion team are in our customer org. They're not on the sales team. So I don't know how common that is. So yeah, so growing and renewing and all that is in the customer org. So that's in his world. And so he charged her with figuring out, again, like this whole planning document or whatever, and he charged her with figuring it out. And I came to the meeting and they're like, all right, what can you do for us? And I said, well, here's my lane. Here's the part that I can play. Here are the things that I can't do. And I said, the first thing you all need to do is you need to map out the customer journey, because I have a piece of this, but I don't own the whole thing. So, so in terms of like the RevOps resources, like I'm not exactly sure, like, because that to me feels like a little, I'm trying to not do everything. I'm trying to focus as much as possible. So what they need to do is come back and say, okay, product marketing defines the ICP, the messaging, the positioning, and then you'll hand that over. And then the next question is, like, what are we communicating to whom and when? So that's partly me, but it's also me working with the product team, because it's not just about what, customer marketing is doing, but we need to be coordinated so the in-product messaging makes sense as well. And then I said, we need to figure out, what do we want people to do? Like, you telling me you want 100 leads or 500 leads or whatever, like that's not how it's going to work, because I can't just deliver leads. Like, we need to figure out, well, what is the experience? So if someone's interested, is there any self-service? Is there any PLG motion? Can they do a trial? Can they do anything? Or do they have to talk to sales? And even when they talk to sales, like, what do we want them to actually do? Again, like, you all need to map this out. And then I can help amplify I can amplify the message to the right person at the right time. That's where I feel like customer marketing's expertise is. Y'all need to figure out what the RevOps role is and the plumbing. Because again, the person on my team was so focused on like the plumbing and how do we identify when someone raises their hand and how do we assign them to the right salesperson. And like, it took me a little while because he's so great and so independent. And then I'm like, wait a minute, we're not moving fast because he's spending all this time trying to figure out how to get a hand raiser over to the right salesperson. Like, somebody else should be doing that. So again, like, we're still definitely a work in progress, but I'm optimistic, unless they come back to me and say, hey, Rebecca, you said this, but we totally disagree, right? Like, I went into the meeting and said, this is where I said, because I've been in the role. So many years ago, I was the program manager for expansion at a company. And like, that's what I did in that role. And so I've seen that happen. I've seen that work. So I said to them, like, this is what I think we need to do. And my plan is to come back to them with the things that I said I would do, and then be like, okay, like, where is the rest of it? It shouldn't be on customer marketing to do all of it. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, this reminds me of the call that Ari shared back in April. I think it was the 21st, and he shared about like the priorities and being able to say no and telling, how to say no. Basically, it was what I really liked was he was like, people would come and ask, hey, can you do this? And I'd say, sure, but we'd have to take away from this other program. Like, I know it's a little bit different because of what you're saying, Rebecca, like you're focusing on like staying in that lane, and that's a really good guidelines for making sure you keep your focus. But I just like the way he talked about how we are being asked to do so many more things, and we really have to align each of these things back to the goals of the company, the department, our responsibilities and our job, and make sure all of these things are aligned and that the right priorities are being taken care of, instead of, oh yeah, I can do this on the side. And then what you're talking about, Rebecca, reminds me just of the technology side. Like, yes, we can get these advocacy and reference tools to help us, but a lot of times it might be as simple as setting up some Zaps in Zapier or make.com, like, and thinking about how can we automate some of these things to make this go a little bit faster, because so much of our jobs now is playing with this technology on a regular basis and doing these manual jobs that could be automated if we spent a little time to do that.
It sounds like, Rebecca, what your colleague has been asked to do, and I agree with you, by the way, about sticking to the lanes, but it's like marketing ops, and there should be a separate marketing. In fact, most companies seem to do have a marketing ops team that does all that, all the back end stuff about where the leads end up and how they pass the sales and the flows and all the rest of it. So, I never got involved in that from a demand gen standpoint. I just advised on that, and I, focus on trying to generate those leads and trying to put it through the funnel. But yeah, I didn't have time to start working out which salesperson is going to get this lead and everything else, because I'd be there all day.
Absolutely.
If-
Allison Bukowski, I see you're on. You have
I
anything
am.
to share?
Hey, everybody. It's been a very long time. But I was free and I was like, I am jumping on Mary's call because I love being here. I just want to echo some of what Rebecca's saying, but then also what Daniel was saying. I think that this is just so much why we need somebody that has the overall view, right? It's part of why I stepped into my new role. I'm well aware that not everybody, not all the orgs have like a CCO or a customer experience person that can do that, can see it from a 10,000-foot view, bring the right stakeholders to the table, right? To have a conversation about how does this actually flow? Because it is completely a loop. However, so yay, if you're lucky enough to have that, because I think that that's the right way, the best practice of doing it. But, Daniel was talking about, how do you go about, getting the buy-in and then keeping the buy-in, right? And maintaining the lines of communication and keeping those open. The roadshow approach that he described, 100%, getting yourself a seat at the meeting table, right? Like SKO, a lot of those are happening right now and things like that, and make sure that you're presenting. But it's also like this term, like everboarding, right? It's not just onboarding. It's like you have to consistently do it. So another thing that is also really helpful is having, I don't know how many of you have an internal like advisory council or a governance kind of committee for customer advocacy, customer marketing, customer experience type things, where during that roadshow that Daniel was talking about, you kind of force that, hey, and we're going to do this quarterly, and I need someone from CS, I need someone from sales, I need somebody from product, from the marketing org to be a part of this, so that we make sure that we're doing what we've said we can do, and that we are setting shared priorities. And Mary, back to your point, that we have pushback priorities. That's what I call them, where it's like, here, they're documented. So this is what we said we would achieve, and how we can kind of push back on that if needed, if there are other competing priorities. But then you keep your stakeholders engaged. And I think that's the way to kind of make sure that that leadership support comes in, because there's just so many programs that die on the vine, or CMA professionals that are overworked because leadership forgot. And it's not always even intentional. They just simply forgot. So by setting that cadence, I found that very helpful. So that's my 2 cents, I guess.
Yeah, I would say, like, I definitely agree with that. Additionally, from my experience in community and doing all of that, like, when I would first start a community, I'd come in and say, I'm going to start a community. I'd like to just find out who's interested in being updated on this once in a while about what is going on with the community. And I actually get a lot of hand raisers that wanted to be on that list. And what I found is when I went to share that information, I would do an email, but then I'd also copy it and paste it to each individual in Slack, so that there was an open dialogue between both of us, because it's so easy to look at an email quick and see, oh, there's a few updates in the community. That's great. I'll read it later. And the same with customer marketing. But I think I've heard more and more people lately over the past year sharing how they're putting together these boards and kind of committees of how they're going to do certain things like customer communications or customer marketing and advocacy and things like that. So that's a really great idea as well.
Because ultimately we can't do this stuff in a vacuum. And that's what I, in all my conversations over the last week and a half, that is what I'm hearing is just a resounding, I do my part and have like to the customer experience, and they love me, they love working with this program, and then it just completely falls apart in another area of the business. And that's something that definitely has to be discussed. So, we do our small part, right? CMA, I still consider myself like a CMA practitioner, that's what we're here to do. And if it means we get the right people at the table, we're not going to get like credit for it, but hey, we did it for the benefit of our program and our resource and the resources that we desperately need.
Yeah, absolutely. So Allison, what are you planning on for or seeing or planning for this year for 2024 in the CMA realm?
Well, essentially what I'm planning for is how can I continue to help support the CMA professionals? I'm very privileged that I get to keep working in this world, and now I get to look at it from that, 10,000 foot view of how can we improve the overall process. But I will say that the last 9 days, that's how long I've been with Point of Reference now in my customer experience role. There are themes, and I'm hearing them loud and clear. It's 2023 sucked. So resources are at there's no resources. Now I have nobody to do the things that we're doing previously, or, hey, that person got let go and now I inherited this. That's a big one. I'm hearing a lot of people saying I inherited a reference program. I inherited an advocacy program. So now what? The other piece of it is just leadership. No idea, no support. So it's very timely that we're talking about this now, because you aren't alone. If you're facing that, it's everyone that I've talked to. And then user adoption, getting my stakeholders to do what they're supposed to do, follow the processes that we've put in place. Those are the three big ones, the themes that I've pulled out. So I'm not happy to hear it in any way, shape, or form, but it aligns very nicely to what is being brought up today.
Yeah. What was the second one real quick? I was just writing them down.
So the lack of resources, and then the user adoption, like those stakeholders, that was the third one. And then the leadership support is the other one.
Anybody else want to share their predictions for this year or what they're working on?
This is Maria. Sorry, I sound horrible. I've been sick all week. So I apologize. That's why I'm off camera, but I had a really good conversation with Allison on Wednesday in her new role at Point of Reference. So I was just explaining to her, and it follows this conversation because, for so many years I managed a program that was just well respected and known and really pushed like the boundaries in terms of getting new customers, and everybody wanted to join in and be a part of it. And so I'm here now at Stripe, which I love, great company. But they're just growing so fast. They're just so under-resourced. So I'm doing a lot of tactical things that I'm not used to doing, but I'm learning a lot. So that's great. And like, it's easier, like I have to be cautious on what I say no to, because it's easier to say no when you're kind of managing a program that's like tried and true versus a program that's in the infancy stage. So just feel like pushing, kind of like trying to get them to set more strategic objectives besides what I've been given. And so I think they see the value of that. Made a couple of big wins this week with kind of getting an IT resource to support us just with a reference edge, which is great. And then with some sales, just some sales wins. So that's good, but just capturing that value and continuing to elevate it so people see it. I think that's like just super important to continue to do that. So it's definitely a learning experience to me, but I'm grateful for this opportunity and happy again to work with Allison at Point of Reference. This is my third company where we've implemented or used rather a reference edge. So
I didn't pay Maria to show up on this call or anything, but thank you, Maria.
That's okay. We also have Evan Huck on here, so we have a good kind of layout of different vendors that are here. But Evan, do you have anything that you want to share on 2024 predictions or things where you see people are focusing on different goals and maybe even how they're going to try to reach these goals?
Yeah, I'll start high level first. I mean, I'm always out there talking to investors and VCs primarily. We're post Series A, pre Series B, so get a pretty good pulse on that. I think the general sentiment is like there will be continued rockiness, but like a slight uptick towards goodness, which is great. And granted, these are coming from VCs who want to be optimistic because that's their entire business. But I think there's some general optimism, and especially as the public markets do well, I think that helps investor confidence. And why that matters to you is like then you fund departments, right, instead of taking away, and you fund go-to-market stuff. So I think that's good. I think you saw like a lot of, I think the nice shakeup that happened is like you're seeing a lot of, there's this huge proliferation of vendors, and a lot of it didn't solve a huge problem. And you see those vendors start to get knocked off. And so obviously that sucks in the meantime because like you lose jobs and stuff like that. But I think like, yeah, if you do something like Maria did, you land at this new company, like this next wave of companies is going to be, after having weathered the storm, is going to have, is going to be very strong. So I think that's promising. I think from a customer marketing perspective, like the trend I've noticed, just from an investment in departments perspective, is just there's a decreasing like patience for results. And so the error that I think we saw people make is like these longer planning cycles and trying to do this whole big strategy. And you would do that for like 4 to 5 months, and then people would be like, all right, I haven't seen anything, so like we're just going to cut it, and this beautiful slide deck with all the strategy just goes out the window. So I think like there just be balance, obviously long-term strategy with a need for like short-term tactical hard-hitting results to gain some credibility that you can then use to go execute your long-term program.
Yeah, that's when I was working at Demand Base and I had to take over our program for advocacy and community. My goal, because we had so much focus on, we need results like yesterday, so you have to get them now. And I had a short-term plan and a long-term plan that I kept switching back and forth to work on. So I'd spend some time each week doing that. And I've been trying to teach people in community to do that as well, because I think in community, it was always, hey, 12 to 18 months before you start to see any kind of return on investment. It's like, no, you can't wait 12 to 18 months. You're going to have a new CMO come in the middle of that and like get rid of the whole thing. So you have to find some results immediately and be very strategic about what you're doing and what you're not going to do. Lauren Turner, you said revenue earlier in the call, right?
Yes, I did.
How are you going to hit revenue?
Oh man, let me pull out my magic 8-ball. Outlook unclear. What we're really looking at right now, and I don't know whether we're a microcosm of the whole economy within customer marketing and advocacy or all of tech per se, but I'm hearing the constant themes. There's no budget for anything, there are no resources, do more with less, be scrappy. I swear if I hear the word scrappy one more time. But even the traditional advocacy programs, I think, are almost being turned on their ear, because you're looking at those customer proof points with your referrals, your references, your reviews, customers helping other customers, all of those things that we know are really valuable, but they don't have a dollar value attached to it. And if you do, I mean, because the references, all of those things can be used to help facilitate new business coming in. But to be able to say, okay, well, that call between the prospect and your customer is worth X% of the new contract that came in. Everyone has a different idea of what X is. And there are some companies where sales isn't even going to admit that there is X. It's going to be, oh, well, sales closed it. It's, sales did the work, and then they'll still go back to CMA and say, okay, how many more dollars did this community program bring in? And so there's now this additional pressure to not only bring in all of the inherent goodness that we see with customer advocacy in terms of those traditional KPIs, but now we're also being asked to monetize the community as well, and be able to put a stick in the ground and say, yep, this is how many more dollars came in from upsell and cross-sell as a direct result of community. And the sticking point isn't just now we need to figure out how to monetize the community, but it's that direct piece. Because a good community is part of an ecosystem that is helping to drive all of those eventual upsell, cross-sell, happy customers, renewal, all of those other things. And so you're never going to get that type of demand gen funnel conversion where, oh, I had a webinar and someone says, oh, that was an amazing thing, I learned so much, hand me a contract. And so to be able to have that expectation, to be able to create a through line is extraordinarily difficult. And it's basically the only way we can really do it is with some kind of fuzzy math. And all you need is one executive to not agree with the fuzzy math that you've put together, and then you're dead.
Well, that, or they just
that's a big rant. I'm really sorry.
Well, that, or they just come in and they're like, okay, we have to make cuts. We're just going to get rid of all of these people and we'll deal with what happens, get profitable, and then start hiring back people that want to support customers, which is what I've seen.
It's really funny how the tides have turned. I mean, with COVID, you had an immediate retention issue because companies were closing left and right, and so suddenly it dawned on Marblehead, oh, we have to actually care about our customers, and so the investment in these types of CMA programs were very good, and they were popular, and I kind of feel like once there became a little bit of a plugging of the massive attrition of customers and there was a little bit more stability in that retention, it was like, oh, I guess we don't have to care about customers anymore. Let's go back to demand gen and the things that we can measure.
I agree.
And part of it, I think, is inherent to a corporate culture. It's like, do you care about customers because you actually care about customers, or do you care about customers only so much as you can make it transactional, and we care about them so long as they renew. Okay, now we don't have to care about them until their renewal is up again.
Yeah, that's not good. And I have to say, like, with your focus on communities and making them getting those monetized quickly, I found that it's very similar to advocacy, because your advocates to me are another community. They're a group of people that do want to connect with each other in most cases, and they have specific things that they want. They have reasons why they're participating and everything. So it's really similar to what community and advocacy are. Switch those two things.
And I've never had them as separate things. I've always had them very, very much integrated and blended, where we're trying to grow the community while also using the community as a way to service and nurture advocates.
To any consolation, Lauren, and to your point about the kind of expectations that are placed, I think what I noticed, certainly as the pandemic hit, was that there was very much a focus from those that were in demand gen, field marketing, to actually work even more with the community teams and customer marketing, because they realised, like the penny drops at the 11th hour, but they realised the importance of actually having the kind of expertise and what we bring to the table to be able to help drive the revenue, and also make sure that those customers stay with the organisation. And as I said, I was in a very fortunate position because I was doing demand gen and field marketing, but I kind of then ran and drove the whole kind of argument for customer advocacy and one of my former companies. But my advice would be, alongside the kind of conversations with the sales leadership, if I would seek out the demand gen and field marketers and have conversations to the side to make sure they absolutely sort of tap in to what you're doing, so that they can go out and spread the message as well. So that you're not then literally seen as being on the side and sort of an extension or sort of an adjunct to whatever they're doing. It's almost like an integral part of the whole revenue operation.
Oh, I very much do. It's something that I've always done from the beginning, regardless of what company I was, that I will get involved with all of the cross-functional department meetings and keep them abreast of what's going on and get their input and contribute to that. So for outbound marketing plays for demand gen, for example, I will surface up customers with quotes and things that will tie into whatever that theme is that they're putting out, and tag teaming with them, as well as taking some of the more salesy sounding outbound marketing plays and toning it down and making it more appropriate for customer facing communications. It's just more along the lines of those activities, because you can't claim a specific percentage. They're constantly being asked for, but they're not recognized as part of what's contributing to the revenue. And so then you go back and they're like, okay, well, how much money did the community generate? And it's like, well, these are all the activities that we did, and these are things that led to revenue. But I can't say, well, 10% of that is due to customer marketing, because it's purely someone's conjecture as to what that contribution is worth. And if they want to find a quick thing to cut, then they can just easily devalue what that contribution is. Okay, fine. You brought in the ecosystem that created compelling marketing messages that got that prospect in the door. You had them talk to a customer that helped close the deal, and in between there was a webinar and a white paper and an ebook, but we're just going to give all the credit to sales once it closes. And so now we're going to look back and be like, well, customer marketing hasn't done anything. And you're like, but wait a minute.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think it was Evan Jacobs in the community was saying that he's shifted his focus from revenue influenced to like last touch or something like that. I'm hope to get him on next month to kind of talk about that. But at the same time, I had an interesting conversation with Dean Shaw where he's trying to nail down those metrics and find out really what does this program not just influence, but what is it responsible for? And I said, well, can't you just ask sales, like what percentage of the sale, when there's a reference added to it, do you credit customer marketing with generating? And he said, yes, but I've been in a situation where people have been like, okay, well, the company got $3 billion in sales this year. And once everybody came together and said what their contribution was, it showed $12 billion in sales. So he's like, so that would help. And I was like, that's a really good point, because then if you are the CEO or somebody else, in the C-suite, and you get that information and you're like, wait a minute, how did everybody contribute? And it says we have 4 times the revenue we actually had. That doesn't make any sense.
Yep. And then when you have something like the threat of impending layoffs, everyone's going to want to validate, to your point, what they did to justify their existence. And so you ask sales, how much of customer marketing impacted that close? They're going to be like, well, not much. I'm an amazing salesperson. I would have closed that whether we had a reference or not. It helped.
And when they are kind of cutting customer marketing, a lot of sales teams have done the search for references before, so that work goes back on them, which is more stressful for them, obviously. But I'm happy to see that some companies seem to be turning around to go back to offering some customer marketing, because that revenue is so important, and it's just figuring out those metrics. It's difficult. I haven't heard anybody give an answer on this topic that has been super, super helpful and just like straight to the point. Like, this is all you have to do. I haven't heard anything great on that.
So much of it depends on the corporate culture and what department the sacred cow is. And that's where I think it really boils down, that if it's a sales driven organization, then sales can do no wrong. And even if they don't make their quotas, they don't make their quotas because the marketing wasn't compelling enough, or you didn't have enough webinars, or like whatever it is, it's not them. And you can basically just shift the blame to whoever is not, the favorite child in the department, or sorry, in the company. In the company. So, I mean, in ours, it happens to, I think it tends to be CSMs that, the CSMs can do no wrong, even if they don't fully understand how their own product works, and basically turn everything back to our onboarding manager because they can't do a proper demo.
Well, I think though that customer success is getting a major shift in how they're seen, because as I've been talking to more people.
Sorry, Evan.
What's that?
No, just responding to
Yeah.
something that Evan posted in the chat.
Well, I looked at SaaStr, Jason Lumpkins, like he talks about things, and he's talking about how in a lot of organizations, customer success is going away because it's just not as helpful or supportive as they thought it would be. And I think it has to do with, one, like, a lot of customers now want self-service, and there are companies even in our space that do not offer a lot of documentation at all, or ways to really be successful without going through somebody that you meet every 2 weeks and talk to. So there's that. We want more self-serve options. We want to do what we want to do. We want to have a general idea of what's going to make us successful.
And to do that, you need to have a really close alignment between your product team, engineering, and your customers. Because if you're going to be so reliant on self-serve, you have to have a product that's easy enough to use that you can self-serve.
Yeah, you do. But on top of that, so many SaaS companies offer customer success by someone with 12 to 18 months of experience.
Yep.
I have gotten on multiple calls with community platforms where I was representing a client, and I had somebody that was 6 months out of college trying to tell me how to build communities that I've built for 14 years.
Right.
And it's like, number one, you don't have to tell me. Number two, I'm not hopping on another call because I can figure out.
You're not offering a value in your.
Right. It becomes more of a waste of time than anything else. And more people have more experience now. So they, Daniel probably isn't going to want to hop on a call with somebody that has 6 months of experience and telling him how to run his team and build his strategy. We know what we're doing. Give me that option. And customer success in so many companies is step 1, 2, 3, 4 is exactly the same for everyone. Nobody wants to go through that.
Yep. That's absolutely true and fair.
Lauren, real quick.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Just to build off what you were saying, I will say this again, that I am extremely lucky to work at the company I work for and work for the CMO that I work for. But find yourself or empower your current CMO or VP of marketing with the same hatred of your same head of marketing or whoever or yourself to be able to pull all of the data that that shows all of the touch points, because our CMO and many of us in marketing follow his lead. Anytime a salesperson is like, yeah, I close this by myself, we go to the data that we have, because we analyze this all the time to see how our programs are doing, take a screenshot of the first time somebody interacted with us and like send it back to them. And it got so much, it was part of the culture in the company that are at an SLT meeting. I believe Dave Kranowitz, our CRO, and Scott Fingerhut, our CMO, like Dave said something about how there's all these deals that sales close themselves. Scott was like, cool, let me talk to our head of demand gen and I will get back to you. and it came back that at most 1% of all deals that were closed for the year were just the immaculate, conclusion, as it were, that sales did everything. So the ability to show, like, yes, we don't know how much this webinar actually affected it, but to say that, to just say it out loud that sales did everything is factually wrong. And we're not just saying it's factually wrong. Here's the actual evidence that it's happened.
These are all the touches, yeah.
These are all the touches. And even then, that changes the conversation again from, I need to show that this touch equaled this deal. It's no, this collection of touches equals this this deal, which is why me as my team, like our team, I am freed up from having to justify the amount of money that our programs affect, right? I mean, I can pull the number. I can see like a reference call was used on deals upwards of $31 million since the time I've been here. But I also know that that isn't the truth, right? It's a touch point. So the more you can document it, the more you can show it on any given deal. And if you can get all of the deals, be like, look, you're showing the value that you bring, and that take out any number of those things, and that salesperson doesn't close the deal.
Daniel, can I just on that point though, and I agree with you. One observation, and this is a challenge that I had at a couple of companies, which is, as we know, sales execs can be very precious about their customers and their accounts. And trying to get them to fill out that information in Salesforce to say, actually, I've sent this reference, or I've actually spoken with this account about this particular client engagement, or this particular customer, and the way they're using our platform is a challenge. And because they're not putting it in, we're completely blind to the fact that they're using that information. I mean, it's bad enough to get them to fill out Salesforce for the basic stuff, let alone all the other stuff. So how do you get around that? Because I agree with you. It is about the touch points, and it's all about the data to show this isn't simply, because I often say to sales teams, look, if it's that straightforward, if you want bank qualified and, from the get-go, I might as well just flip and take the commission, close the deal myself, then we don't need you guys. And it's kind of, for me, the challenge is trying to find that evidence, because they will not fill out the information in Salesforce.
Yeah.
Okay, I have to interrupt because we only have a couple minutes left. So if anybody wants to hop on next week, or you can take your call off or whatever, I know this could get long, so sorry. Is that okay?
Totally fine. I can answer real quick though, Mary.
Okay, go ahead.
The trick is, yes, our stuff is harder to track, but people, if your Salesforce is done correctly, and your forms when people sign up for webinars are done, like that area should be, and that's a marketing operations thing, that's it's a demand gen thing. That stuff should be automatically put in, regardless of what a salesperson does. If a contact signs up for something, and it's attached to an opportunity, that should be there. We can totally talk about it more, but that's the side I was talking about. Totally agree that getting people to register what they do with references is very hard, but the automation side should at least give you something.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'll connect with you offline on LinkedIn or whatever, and we can sort of continue the conversation at a later point.
Yeah. Okay. Thank